Wondering what the villains of the Evil League or the Defenders of Dalaran might look like in Rise of Shadows? Well, I've got some ideas, including, I think, designs I'm really proud of for Hagatha and Madame Lazul. What? They already revealed Hagatha? Oh, that's fine. We've got Madame Lazul. Oh.
Hey, buddy, watch this.
Yeah, okay, I was a little late with this video, and in the meantime, Hagatha and Madame Lazul have already been revealed, both of which you can see right here next to me. I'm still going to talk about my designs a little bit because I like them, but I also have some cool designs here for Dr. Boom and for King Togwaggle, what they might look like. Also some theories on who the remaining Defenders of Dalaran could be and what some card designs that capture their sort of role or essence in Dalaran might look like. That said, let's go ahead and jump into some of these cards. Real quick, with my design for Hagatha, I thought it'd be cool to take lackeys, this mechanic being introduced, and much in the way Hagatha the hero card turns minions into spells in a weird way, I thought, what if she literally turned minions into spells, and lackeys might be a cool way to do that, maybe punishing them for doing something bad with their evil schemes and turning them into a spell instead. I thought that'd be a cool idea for Hagatha, so this was my version. Also here for Madame Lazul, I thought the fortune-telling idea would be cool if she could actually see the future and see the next card that your opponent was going to draw. So I mocked this one up here that was a little bit stickier than the final version with a big health total, and although might backfire completely and not work at all, could also lead towards multiple instances of value, also just high health minions or something Priest likes. So I thought this one would fit Priest pretty well, if not necessarily being the strongest card in the world. So now moving on to a character we don't actually know what the real card's going to look like. I made this version of Togwaggle called Bling Togwaggle, clearly a pun here, or rhyme with King Togwaggle. This would be the rogue legendary minion, 10 mana, 5/5. Its battle cry reads, add 10 bags of coins to your opponent's deck, and the bag of coins would be a 0 mana, 0/1 minion. With a battle cry, draw a card, and Death Rattle, give your opponent 3 coins. So much like the original Togwaggle is all about sort of deck manipulation and potentially creating problems for your opponent, this version does very much the same thing, but in a different way, because you're filling your opponent's deck with minions that they don't really want to draw. A bag of coins is not a great draw, because it just kills their draw. They only draw a bag of coins. This doesn't have a cast when drawn effect, but it is 0 mana, and the battle cry reads, draw a card. So if they draw a bag of coins and they want to get their normal card draw instead, they can play a bag of coins, and maybe they'll get a regular card that they're excited to see and can play. The downside there, of course, is they now give themselves a minion, which could potentially give the King Togwaggle or Bling Togwaggle player 3 coins. So the rogue has a weapon equipped. They can just keep beating down these bag of coins, taking the coins. And then, of course, not only do you have a 3 mana advantage from coins directly, but you have all kinds of crazy potential synergies. So your opponent has to have this risk-reward scenario where it's like, I want to see my card, I want to get a real card, but if I play this bag of coins, I'm potentially giving my opponent a ton of stuff to work with. Maybe they're going to just do something absurd and kill me. Maybe they're going to make a giant Edwin. Maybe they chain forever with Gadgetzan Auctioneer. Can I risk it? And they have to make that decision. Another problem is a bag of coins might lead into another bag of coins. And they create the scenario where they're just filling up their board with all these 0 mana, 0/1 minions. And maybe the Bling Togwaggle player says, okay, I'm just going to leave those there. Maybe I just let them fill up their board and I never kill the bag of coins. So you have kind of 2 different ways here to disrupt your opponent, and it's just causing all this chaos. Now, obviously, it's a 10 mana play. It's a very slow sort of thing, only getting a 5/5 for 10 mana. So there are some real risks and downsides, particularly in Rogue, a class that can't just stay alive forever. So it's not like this is an obviously good card. I think it's just a shenanigans style card that creates some really interesting back and forth moments and some decision making on the side of both players, which is exactly what I like to see. So is there some way to break this? Yeah, I don't know, maybe. I'm not thinking that far ahead. I just think this captures the idea of a greedy King Togwaggle looking for treasure, and it fits the idea of sort of robbing a bank like in Dalaran, the Dalaran Bank, pretty well. So for me, Bling Togwaggle, I think, would be a neat spin on a character in a fresh way. So moving on here, we have my version of Dr. Boom, Iron Goblin, as I'm calling him, because this looks like Dr. Boom in an Iron Man, maybe a War Machine suit. Clearly, Dr. Boom already based on a Marvel Comics reference with Dr. Doom. So I just leaned all in. But he's not an Iron Man, he's an Iron Goblin. So this version of Dr. Boom is all about multiple callbacks to the past two sort of iterations or eras of Dr. Boom. He starts out as a 5-mana 5/5, which I know is a little unusual, but because he has a battle cry that adds 2 boom bots to your hand, both of which are magnetic, and Dr. Boom is a mech, means you can spend 7 mana to get a 7/7 here for your Dr. Boom, so we're still retaining a little bit of that fun math. But also, these magnetic zoom bots do some cool things, as you'll see here. They not only 1-mana 1/1s, but also have magnetic and rush. So you can do things like make a 7/7 Dr. Boom that can attack immediately, or a 6/6 Dr. Boom that can attack immediately, or you can save your Zoom bots later to combo them out with something else. And then beyond that, they actually have a Death Rattle that adds a spare part to your hand, because I wanted them to be somewhat reminiscent to Boom bots, but they're a little different. They're Zoom bots, they attack immediately, but spare parts come back, which is from Dr. Boom's original expansion, Goblins versus Gnomes. So that's a callback. Also, magnetic from the Boomsday Project, Dr. Boom's second expansion. So we bundle 2 callbacks into a single card here while still capturing some of the flavor and theme and feel of Dr. Boom. Now, I thought about making them Boom bots. I thought about making him a 7-mana 7/7. Ultimately, I wanted him to feel a little distinct and unique, because it would otherwise be kind of confusing to have all these different iterations of Dr. Boom running around. But I think this still goes in a lot of different directions and gives you some cool tools to work with, and just at the end of the day, a lot of resources bundled into a single card. You kind of get 4 total extra cards with 2 spare parts and a couple Zoom bots. You get some rush shenanigans. So there's a lot of different ways to play this card, and I like that flexibility. So I think it would be a fairly strong card in a lot of different cases. Which allows you to split your resources, commit them all, whatever it is, it still works pretty well. It has instant activation and feels a bit like Dr. Boom. So I like the dual callback design here, and I think this would be a good card for the game. All that said, I want to move on to some potential defenders of Dalaran. So these would be the good guys, represented in the non-villain classes. For instance, here we have a mage character, Lieutenant Sinclari, who, if you don't know, she is the head warden or jailer for the Violet Hold, which a lot of people know the Violet Hold is sort of the prison in Dalaran where they keep all these crazy monsters and stuff. And she hangs around keeping all those people locked up. So I wanted to capture what that might look like in a Hearthstone card. It's a 9-mana 4/6 for mage. The battle cry reads, make all enemy minions go dormant. Dormant, of course, the effect for things like the darkness, where they are just inactive bubbles on board that don't get affected by anything in the game. They don't get psychic screamed or removed. They're just totally inactive. But then she has a death rattle that awakens all minions. So they come out of their dormancy when she dies. So it's basically like she's putting them in jail. I wanted to capture the idea of jail. So she makes them go dormant like they're in a jail cell. And as long as she's alive, she's keeping them jailed. But as soon as she's killed, they're going to be free to escape from their prisons, which I think is a really cool idea. So, if you know that Lieutenant Sinclair exists, you better not play 7 minions on board if you're a minion-based deck, or they may never come back unless you have some way to immediately answer your Lieutenant Sinclair. Now, keep in mind that a class like Priest using this card would be ridiculous because they have such cheap, efficient silences. They could just play Lieutenant Sinclair and silence and lock out a board. Mage is going to have a little bit harder time doing that. They still can with transform effects like Polymorph if she lives for more than a turn or 2. So there are some neat potential shenanigans there where you can disappear her death rattle so that nothing ever escapes. But I think that's cool. I think that adds to the complexity and strategy of a card like this and requires your opponent to have some sort of immediate answer. Also keep in mind, she's not necessarily that good if there's only 1 or 2 things on board, and if you don't have a way to immediately silence her or transform her and your opponent does answer her, then you really haven't done much other than sort of stall out the board or freeze out the board, and in fact, you might even just heal the board if you're making damaged minions go dormant. Or silenced minions go dormant, you're bringing them back to life. So there are some natural checks and balances built into this thing. I think a lot of people's instincts would be that it's too strong. It's a sort of universal board removal or whatever attached to a decent minion. I think those instincts are fair, but the more you think about it and the more situations and context you actually put this into, I think it'd be okay. I don't think it would feel all that crazy powerful. In a lot of ways, it's kind of like a Frost Nova attached to a minion. Operates differently, clearly in a handful, but not that much stronger at the end of the day. And because it's so hard to combo anything out with Lieutenant Sinclair outside of some crazy discount card shenanigans, then most of the time she's going to be answered fairly easily. Your opponent will be right back where they started, and you kind of just stalled a turn, which does feel a bit like a mage sort of thing anyway. So to me, I think this captures the mechanic or fantasy or theme of the character perfectly, while still looking like a fun and fitting mage card. Moving on, I have Khadgar here, one of the most famous mages in all of Warcraft lore, clearly a storied Dalaran character, and I think somebody who just kind of has to be in the expansion. I really hope so. And because he's so famous and prominent, I wanted to turn him into a kind of Lich King style card where he's this just good neutral minion that a lot of different decks and classes might like to run. So I built something that looks kind of familiar with that. Khadgar for me is an 8 mana 6/6, and he reads, at the end of your turn, add one of Khadgar's artifacts to your hand. And I took a couple of his artifacts here. Up first, the Pipe of Insight, a spell that draws 2 cards from both players' decks. Now, very carefully read that. That does not say both players draw 2 cards from their decks. That says draw 2 cards from both players' decks. So that means you draw 2 of your own cards and you draw 2 of your opponent's cards. So not only are you drawing 4 cards total, but you're stealing 2 cards from your opponent. And your first instinct's going to be Regis. That is totally insane. That's like a 2 times Death Grip plus some additional card draw of your own. That's totally bonkers ridiculous. And you're right. I wanted to make these artifacts really powerful and significant because if you look at Khadgar himself and compare him to Lich King, there are some significant differences. First off, he's a weaker body. Beyond that, he doesn't have taunt. So Khadgar is going to be a riskier sort of thing to play. It's not always going to work incredibly well. So I needed these to be a little bit more impactful than Lich King. It's like a Death Grip times 2 or more, right? It's much, much better. Now, we also have Atiesh, which you'll know if you played in the Karazhan era with Medivh. This is exactly the same weapon that Medivh equips when you play the character Medivh, which, for those of you who know lore, Khadgar ends up with Atiesh. So I thought, why don't we bring Atiesh back to life in this new Dalaran era through Khadgar? So that's just one of the artifacts you can get. It's just Atiesh, which again, we know is really good for 3 mana. Getting multiple minions out of that can be great. But if you compare it to Frostmourne from Lich King, it's probably better in a lot of ways, but not enormously better. And then finally here I have Gem of Health. I think this is pretty clearly the weakest of the 3 options, but it's still the kind of thing that can make a really big impact because it's restoring 15 health to both players. So you're probably not going to want to ever use this in an aggro deck, which I think is important because having one weaker card or one card that reduces the consistency in a certain archetype can go a long way towards balancing it. But beyond that, it's still a great card for control decks if you're taking that risky turn playing Khadgar without taunt, without any defensive stuff. This can help you make a recovery and not die. Because 15 health for 4 mana is pretty solid. It's, better than like Greater Healing Potion we saw in the past. So if you get a couple of those, you might just be able to hang around for a really long time. But you're probably often still hoping for Pipe of Insight or Atiesh. Regardless, probably could have made 3 or 4 more artifacts like Lich King. Just went for 3 for now. I think they're all pretty cool. I'd like this sort of just universally good card. Any sort of mid-range or control deck would love to run Khadgar here. And that's what I'm looking for in those really prominent Warcraft characters. I want them to be seen. I want them to be significant. And I loved how important Lich King has been. I would hope Khadgar could do the same. So for me, Aladane White Cloud is a 3 mana 3/3. And his battle cry reads, swap the lowest cost minion in your hand with the highest cost minion in your deck. So he's moving minions from one place to another, exactly like a Flight Master. And in this case, he's helping Druid contribute to their game plan, which is often ramping up to higher cost minions and playing higher cost minions in some sort of an advantageous way. So that can be used in sort of 2 different scenarios. I think one is just playing really big stuff. If you're trying to get a ramp Druid style, just play a giant thing and make sure it's in your hand. Alternatively, you can maybe manipulate your hand and deck to put like a combo piece in your hand, say like a Malagos. And then you use, your Dream Petal Florist to discount your Malagos while taking out whatever random low cost minion, so that you're maintaining some kind of hand state where you always have something big and cool to play. Now, this is a battle cry, so it's something you do once. You just decide when you want that to happen. Do I want it now? Sure, let's set it up. If you play this on curve, maybe it's not that helpful unless you're trying to hit exactly a 4-drop. But that's what's so cool about it is I don't know exactly how you're supposed to use it. I'm not dictating you're supposed to use it in some way. I can certainly see some Malagos ideas, but that's up to the player. That's up to the game. It just gives you a tool. It gives you a chance to do that. And I think Druid is going to need some help in the future as they lose a lot of stuff in a standard format rotation. A card like this could help them do that, help them ramp up successfully, give them, whatever it is. Maybe they need like a big beast to summon from some of the beast synergy cards we saw in Rostakon's Rumble. I don't know. I just like that this creates those possibilities. It creates those options. I think that's a really cool tool and a utility piece for Druid to have. Kind of like a, tutor, kind of like a card draw, but in a really significant and unique direction that allows you to create neat opportunities. Moving on here, I have a new Hunter legendary, Varisa Windrunner, one of the famed Windrunner sisters. You guys might know a couple of those. She's a 5-mana 5/4, and she has spell damage +2. What? Spell damage in Hunter? That's a new thing. I think it'd be fun to try though, right? They have a lot of damage spells. And her battle cry reads, for the rest of the game, spell damage affects your hero power. So what if we take spell damage and we make it a permanent impact on the hero power? Now, this doesn't mean it permanently affects it forever. It's not like this spell damage is for around forever, but it's whenever there's spell damage on board, it's making your hero power that much better. So that 2 mana is gaining the advantage of your spell damage on top of any other sort of damaging minions. And we've seen, Spell Hunter in the past, but it was not about doing outright raw damage. It was about summoning minions and turning your spells into resources on board. I think this takes some of the spell variations of Hunter in a different direction where it's more about like doing damage. And it's not just like face damage either, right? Like think about Explosive Shot with a spell damage style build. That would be awesome. It would make your Explosive Shot a really cool removal spell. So Varisa is not only good right off the bat with, your explosive traps or your kill commands because she has spell damage herself, but you're also getting this permanent impact. So for 7 mana, you're dealing 4 damage with your hero power with Varisa and a hero power. Later on in the game, you can play whatever other spell damage minion and maybe hit for 3 or 4. I think the idea of giving you these little chip opportunities to toss in an extra 1 or 2 points of damage is exactly the sort of thing Hunters would like to do. I think some people are probably scared of this, like, Regis, that's too much face damage. But I don't really think it would, right? We've never seen a spell damage build take off to a ton of success. Maybe it would stay in check. Maybe this is just sort of a side effect, a little bonus that occasionally gets you a little closer to lethal. And, we need new ways to play. There's a lot of cards rotating out. Hunter will probably be okay with a mid-range deck, but maybe Spell Damage Hunter could be a new way to take a look at the class. And I would like to see some shifts and some changes. So for me, let's do it. Let's make Varisa Windrunner a spell damage synergy card, and why not make your hero power go along with it? I think this is a cool idea. And then finally, one last card here. This is Rayathan, a Paladin legendary minion I've designed. If you're not familiar with this character, he is the captain of the guard of the Underbelly in Dalaran, which is this PvP area where you can fight other players as long as you bribe Rayathan and you don't take damage from his guards. Like, his guards won't mess you up if you've bribed him. So in other words, if you've dealt with Rayathan successfully, you're kind of immune from consequences, which is what I tried to capture with this card. He's a 6 mana 3/6 Paladin minion, and he very simply reads, your other minions are immune. So what that means is, if he's on board and your opponent wants to take trades, they kind of have to kill him first because everything else is going to be immune from damage. Alternatively, if you have a little bit of a board that you want to be able to trade in, Rayathan allows you to do that. Slam him down and take some free from damage value trades. Like, that opportunity's there. Now, keep in mind, though, this card starts to fail really hard on his own. If he isn't supported by lots of other minions, he's just going to kind of sit there and falter. He's not good. He doesn't have taunt. His stat line for 6 mana is pretty terrible. So it's a card with some potential upside, a lot of cool synergies for Paladin who can go wide on the board, but still limited in his direct impact. And for anybody out there who's freaking out about taunt minions, like, you can't make taunt minions immune, Regis, the game will break. Don't worry, Hearthstone already accounted for that. Any minion that has taunt that's immune can just be ignored, much like if a taunt minion has stealth, the game has that built in. So that's not a problem or a challenge for this card. What that means is we have a minion here, I think, that leads itself not only to a cool capture of the fantasy of the character or Dalaran itself, but works pretty neat in a couple different ways and allows you to make some neat plays. It's almost like a Sunkeeper Tarim in a way, but a different direction and a different version of that. So I think it would be a pretty fitting idea for Paladin. And there you go, folks. That wraps it up for some of my ideas here for heroes and villains of Dalaran. Now, I know not all of these are going to have the perfect stats or the perfect cost. Maybe there's some way they're broken. I just don't care. Like, maybe that sounds dismissive, but the idea here is to capture the flavor, the characters, the ideas, the mechanics that might reflect these characters. This is essentially more about like the storytelling of Dalaran and what these characters mean and how their characteristics, their schemes, their histories might lead into some card design. So if you have ways to refine these designs, great. If you think there's a better way to execute the idea of like a prisoner guard dynamic like we explored with Lieutenant Sinclari, let me know. I want to hear the same thing. If there are other characters you think are going to be more likely to be featured from Dalaran, leave it in the comments below. I want to hear that stuff too. That sounds awesome. You guys have a lot of great thoughts and ideas. So share it and I'll happily enjoy it myself, as will everybody else. But until then, thank you so very much for watching, and until next time, game on.